But this is going to launch a whole-of-government approach to rooting out the very serious problem of fraud in federally funded programs around the country.
As an example, you've been seeing it, and seeing it pretty big in Minnesota, $19 billion. But that's only for one little aspect of the fraud. It's $19 billion, and California, as they say, is 10 times worse, and other states are 10. And this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. This is wherever it's taking place. It seems that it's usually in blue states. If it's in a red state, we're going there too. But it seems that it's heavily, heavily, heavily Democrat. And what they've done is so sad. When you look at the Minnesota scam, a lot of it has to do with Somalia. Nobody's calling out anybody, but a lot of it has to do, but it's Somalia and plenty of others. And I believe the governor is complicit. I believe Ilhan Omar is complicit. I believe that your attorney general is complicit. And if they are, you're going to hopefully find out about it, and you're going to have to do what you have to do. If we found half of the fraud that's taking place in this country, and I think you have a chance of doing that, we would have much more than a balanced budget. That's the kind of numbers you're talking about. The theft is incredible. And I think J.D. will make, and Andrew will make a charge later on that local states should handle nursing homes and all of these things that the federal government shouldn't be involved in. It's too big. The federal government should handle military and a couple of other things. But when it comes to nursing homes, you saw where a young gentleman was going around and knocking on doors, and none of the nursing homes existed, none of the nurseries existed. The money that's being paid out, and the federal government pays for it. When you see all these people coming in illegally into our country, many criminals, many drug dealers, murders, 11,888 murders, and you look at California, and more come in, and yet they never had money, and yet they pay them. You know why they pay them? Because the federal government is charged with paying. We're not paying them anymore, and I said that. So these two really smart guys are going to be, I think it's going to, hopefully it's going to be JD's. This will not be like a Kamala, where she was put in charge of the border, and she never went there, JD, right? You promise?
I promise, sir.
Remember, Kamala was put in charge. She was the border czar. She never went to the border. She never called any of the great Border Patrol. The Border Patrol testified. We never spoke to her in 4 years. And that was a disaster. But this is different. This is a different group of people. I think maybe before JD, I'll ask Stephen Miller to say a few words too, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, under President Trump's leadership, as we've seen, the illegal flow across the southern border was stopped completely. But what we found since President Trump came into office is that the Democrats have set up a system to funnel hundreds of billions and ultimately trillions of dollars to migrants that are in our country, oftentimes from places like Somalia. So as an example, ICE recently asked a group of illegal immigrants that were in detention whether or not they were receiving Medicaid. Half of them raised their hands and volunteered that they were on Medicaid. Just volunteered that. These aren't the ones who are hiding it, right? They also asked illegal aliens how they paid their medical bills, and they said that if they don't have Medicaid, they go to hospitals, they get free care there, and they bill it to the taxpayers. So they aren't paying for any of their own health care in this country. This is one example. And we've seen this over and over and over again. So under President Trump's leadership, and then of course with JD and the head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, we're going to see the first ever effort in American history to reclaim the ultimately trillions of dollars that were stolen from taxpayers. I believe, and I know President Trump believes, that when this theft is exposed, we will see that if all of it were stopped, it would be enough to balance the budget. The extraction of wealth from American taxpayers to people who don't belong here is the primary cause of the national debt, and this is the first ever effort to shut that down. Thank you, Mr. President.
First ever. And everyone knows they've been cheating for years. It's the first ever. And it's got to be stopped. I mean, it's got to be stopped. Think of it, Somalia is a third world, maybe a fourth world nation. One of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. They come here and they steal $19 billion. That's crazy. And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but She married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country. Anyway, JD, please say a few words.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important whole-of-government approach to tackle the fraud problem. And let me just tell one story. One of the things that even before this executive order was signed that we were able to stop under the President's leadership is we saw evidence that in Minneapolis there were Somalis, primarily illegal immigrants, who were defrauding a Medicaid program that was meant to go to autistic children. So they were taking children who were supposed to get benefits, and they were claiming that their kids were actually autistic even though they weren't. And what did this mean? This meant two things. Number one, you had a lot of people getting rich off of the fraud while American citizens got poorer. And the second thing that it meant is that you had autistic kids in Minneapolis, in suburban Minneapolis, who weren't getting benefits they needed because Somali fraudsters were literally stealing out of their pocket. It's got to stop. And unfortunately, that kind of fraud is one example of probably hundreds just within the state of Minneapolis, and then it's repeated and replayed all over the United States of America. When we first started talking about this problem, the President made it very clear he wanted us to take the fraud problem seriously because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole that existed is that the agencies of the government weren't actually talking to each other. So Treasury would have evidence of financial fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Justice about it. Health and Human Services had evidence of Medicaid fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Treasury about it. So what this executive order does is force the entire apparatus of the federal government to do two things. Stop the fraud on the American taxpayer and make sure that the benefits that ought by right go to American citizens and not to fraudsters. Andrew Ferguson will be the vice chair and is going to do a great job. If you're curious what's the difference between the vice chair and the vice chair is going to do all the work and I'm going to take all the credit. Andrew.
Yeah, look, I mean, millions and millions of Americans pay into these programs every day, and they expect to get something out of it. And this fraud is just siphoning money that millions of Americans pay to fund their hospitals, to fund their daycare centers, into completely fake businesses. It isn't just unfair to all of us as taxpayers who pay for all this. It's particularly unfair to the Americans who need this the most and watch this money leave their hospital, leave their school system, and go out to fraud. And that is why this effort is so important. And I think we've just begun really looking at this, but I think that one of the things we're going to find is that in a lot of these agencies, the previous administration was pretty lax about existing anti-fraud controls, and we're going to expose that too.
I would take the word pretty out. I would change it with unbelievably lax. They weren't, it's not even lax. Lax isn't a good enough word. The previous administration was fraudulent, okay? And I think that's what you're going to find also. And, you know, we worked so hard, like most favored nations drug prices. For years, people have wanted. We paid the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by far, by 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, more than London would be paying in New York, more than any city in Europe was paying than our cities. We would have a pill that would sell for $10 in Munich, in Germany, would sell for $10, and in New York it would be $130 or whatever. And we worked so hard, and we pulled it off. It's called Most Favored Nations. So now we went from by far the most expensive drugs anywhere in the world, prescription drugs, to the least expensive, and I had to get all the nations to agree, and I don't want to bore you with how I did it, but I did it. Everyone said it was impossible to do, including the drug companies, and we did it. And we worked so hard on it, and we're going to save so much money for the people. Your drug prices are going to be dropping at levels never even, by 50, 60, 70, 80% in some cases, but you work so hard, and then you see them stealing $19 billion. It's like in one pocket, out the other. And I think Andrew and JD, I think they have maybe one of the most important jobs. Maybe it could be one of the most important things that we're signing because I really believe that they have an opportunity to do something so good for our country. You know, people talk about balancing budgets. You can't balance a budget when people are stealing $19 billion, and nobody's ever heard of anything like it. We had, I guess, in the same state, you went autism, where 4 or 5 years ago they spent 1 million, and now it's almost 400 million in just a few years. Well, autism didn't go up like that, and even the 1 million was probably a fraud, but it went from 1 million to almost 400 million in just a few years. These are crooked people. They basically said everybody in the state had autism. These are crooked, horrible people. And, you know, I was elected on, with JD, Make America Great Again. That was it. And we can't have this stuff happening.
Right.
We have to be respected. And they left. So I'm going to sign this. We'll take some questions, but let me sign this first before I don't forget. Let's see. Before I decide not to, okay?
Yes, sir.
I don't forget not to, but maybe I'll decide not to. I would decide not to. If I didn't think they could do the job, I would decide not to. But that'll be a terrible thing. I think they're going to find numbers, Andrew, I think you're going to find numbers that are far higher than you even think. And you know, Andrew came to us. He said, sir, he's read the stories about Minnesota. We know California is many times worse, but Minnesota is terrible. They're all terrible. Those cities are terrible. New York is terrible. What's going on in Chicago, Illinois, with that slob of a governor is terrible. And the kind of money we're talking about is just country changing. It's country changing money. It's having a deficit to having a really profitable country where you can lower your taxes substantially for people. And I think you have an opportunity to do it. And I think you two guys are the right guys. If you guys can't do it, we've got a problem, because nobody else will be able to do it. All right?
Yes, sir.
So I'll sign, and then we'll take some nice questions from our wonderful media. Okay.
Good one.